Let's go ahead and talk about some special considerations from a nutrition standpoint. So I know I haven't hit hydration very much today, which is like a huge factor for firefighter nutrition, right? That I want to hit on fireground performance, which is going to be next week. But in general, just so you guys have that information this week, hydration. So I usually go by the Institute of Medicine's recommendations because they're slightly higher than those like Gen Pop recommendations that you hear. The 64 ounces, your 8 glasses of water a day. That is perfectly fine if you're working mostly desk jobs and you're not really working out in the heat frequently or really running calls and doing a lot of fitness related activity. But for women, that ballpark for running calls, maybe doing like an hour workout a day in reasonable conditions, you're looking at 90 ounces a day, which is roughly 6 of those 16-ounce water bottles that you get from like Deer Park or whatever. And men, we're looking at 125 ounces per day, which is about 8 of those 16-ounce water bottles. So for me, I have to have like a 32-ounce water bottle. That is my emotional support water bottle that goes with me everywhere. And it has a carabiner and a straw on it. The other thing that I've heard from a lot of first responders, they like to have something that with the straw where it kind of clicks in. So if it's rolling around the bottom of an ambulance or a medic unit, at least it's not gross, right? So that having that water bottle with you does make a difference in terms of hydration status for a lot of first responders. Because the problem is, even when we tell first responders, hey, we're researching you for hydration, they still show up dehydrated for the training the next day. So now the big thing I want you to know, because 125 fluid ounces is like, that seems like a lot, right? And it may even be higher if you do end up running a box or if you are actually on a deployment. But all sources of fluid do count towards this. So yes, we want water most of the time. Technically, coffee, tea, and juice does count towards this fluid requirement. However, you have to consider the caffeine amount. So when it comes to caffeine, the myth that caffeine will dehydrate you has largely been debunked, except where you will pee more in that first hour after consuming a caffeinated beverage. However, over the course of the day, total body water hydration doesn't seem to change. Now, the concern is when you're doing those energy drinks or a large amount of coffee, because I have seen the steady drip at some of these stations, right? Over 300 milligrams of caffeine could be concerning. It could compound the effects of dehydration. You could lose more sodium, which is more concerning on like a wildland deployment to me, because typically firefighters, your diets don't necessarily lack in sodium, but that could be something to keep in the back of your mind as you do lose a little bit more sodium when we're doing caffeinated beverages. Now, in terms of what is 300 milligrams of caffeine, we'll talk about that in a second. That's roughly like 20 to 30-ish ounces of coffee. So if you have a bigger travel mug, then yeah, you might be hitting that. But in general, if it's just like a 16-ounce cup of coffee, that's probably okay. But also keep in mind, food does count. So your fruits, your veggies that are high in water. So watermelon is a big one. And watermelon also has the antioxidant lycopene, which is really important for recovery and actually eye health. Cantaloupe, cucumber, any of those water-based fruits. It doesn't contribute a ton of extra fluid, but technically about a cup of extra fluid a day if you do eat your fruits and vegetables. Again, I'm going to hit this really hard in the next presentation, but this is kind of your general recommendations if you are curious how much you need to stay hydrated. And now for the fun part. We are going to talk about alcohol, and then we're going to talk about caffeine, which maybe I should have saved towards the end. But okay, so here's the thing with alcohol. Alcohol has a multitude of challenges in the fire service, right? Because it does add up. And I have been to conferences with firefighters, specifically Redmond in 2019, which was hosted in Nashville, which is basically like country Vegas, if you've ever been. So I've seen firefighters put down 8 beers in about an hour sitting. So, I do know that it can add up. So, keep in mind that the alcohol, it's not just the health consequences, but also if your goal is fat loss and you're doing like 8 beers in a sitting every single weekend, multiple days in that weekend or days off for shift work, right? That can add up really quickly. 8 beers is going to be like 800 calories or more. 8 glasses of wine, same thing. Even the White Claws, which a lot of the rookies are really getting into nowadays, those still add up. That's still going to be 800 calories, right? And the hangover is going to be brutal. And then whatever snacks you eat with it, because a lot of times people, once they have 2 drinks, they start to get a little snacky. So just keep that in mind that it really can tank your diet. Or take your fat loss goals really more than diet. The other concern here with alcohol is, studies suggest that about 58% of career firefighters report partaking in binge drinking. And that typically leads to that heavy drinking classification. So heavy drinking is considered 8 drinks per week for women and 15 drinks per week for men. So I used to try and say, okay, for men, it's technically 2 drinks. Moderate drinking is 2 drinks a day, and women is 1 drink per day. And then, of course, the shift work response to that is, well, I work today. So then does that mean that I can do 4 drinks tomorrow? And unfortunately, that is not how any of this works. But the concern with that heavy drinking classification, so if you're looking at that number, the key factor here is the drinks are in the quantities at the bottom part of the screen. So for beer, that's 12 fluid ounces. Wine, that's 5 ounces, which if anybody's none of the home goods wine glasses are 5 ounces of wine. We're talking like the dollar store little baby glasses of wine. It is not a lot of wine. Only about 1.5 ounces of spirits, 8 ounces of malt liquor. These are the drinks serving sizes, right? So I know my husband, who part of the reason why the dogs were barking was because he was supposed to be supervising him. If he goes and has drinks with his buddy and he puts Deep Eddies into his drink or vodka or whatever into his drink, he's pouring at least 2 shots into that one drink and counting that as 1 drink. That's technically 2. So if you're the type of person who can drink a lot, that can be concerning, not only from like a mental health perspective, like are you avoiding anything, which no one really wants to talk about, but also from a cancer perspective. So the IARC just classified, I don't know if you guys realize this, just classified firefighting as an occupation as a carcinogen. So, and I don't know what your cancer rates are at CAL FIRE. In Fairfax, we've had we had a Cavanta fire, which knocked out a bunch of people we have a relatively high number of first responders in our area, about 27 members currently in a 1,400 member department. That's devastating. Cancer is a big concern in the fire service, and alcohol can significantly increase your risk for cancer, specifically head and neck cancers by about 5 times as much. So if you're in that heavy drinking classification, your risk for head and neck cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, and liver cancer can increase up to 5 times. So it's somewhere between 2 and 5 times. So if you're at that heavy drinking number, it may be a consideration to just scale back, right? Doesn't mean you have a problem. It doesn't mean you need to necessarily go to a therapist. It could be a good idea to do that, but it's just something to start considering, whether your goals are diet, whether your goals are general health, cancer prevention, cardiovascular disease. When we get to that heavy drinking classification, it can be a concern. So just something to think about. Great way to start off the second half of this presentation. But the other thing to talk about is caffeine. Oh, and do I have a question? Yes.
There sort of is one.
Okay.
Just there's a lot of comments going on right now about the sack lunches. That's always a hot topic, and just thoughts. I guess since this is the thoughts on items like the infamous Uncrustables. Do you guys have those out there? Uncrustables.
Yes, of course we
have.
But
this would be in the context of a sack lunch, so a portable,
yes,
line lunch, quick calories.
Yeah, so I will hit this again next week, but I do want to kind of start the conversation with that. So here's the thing. And this is for my health conscious people, and I know in California you lean towards a little bit more health conscious. This is going to come off as a trigger, but sometimes it's okay to do those quick options. And actually, we recommend the Uncrustables for some of our athletes and some of our recruits because they're quick, they're portable, and they are a quick source of energy. So that the white bread, while it's not whole grain and it is not nutrient dense, it is a quick source of carbohydrate that is going to get through your system and is going to digest quickly, even in a response where you are in that sympathetic state. And digestion is, remember, rest and digest, parasympathetic. So it gets to your system faster, so you're able to utilize the calories and the fuel quicker. You're not going to hit a wall as fast. Now, the downside is, from a long-term health perspective, is, eating an Uncrustable, just hanging out on the couch and having like 6 of those. That is where it's a concern. So in a lot of times, and especially at Fairfax when I first started, we have a pretty health conscious organization for the area. And they really wanted me to make the canteen healthy, right? So our canteen is our rehab units that show up to larger responses based on the volunteers. And they wanted to advertise it as a healthy canteen. However, when we talk about sports dietetics, when we talk about nutrition for high intensity activity, the 2 nutrients that we recommend during or pre or before the alarm, when it's hard to do it before the alarm for you guys, honestly, but during, is quick burning carbohydrate, simple carbohydrates that don't have a ton of fiber because fiber slows digestion, which means it doesn't get to the muscles as fast, and sodium. And in our day-to-day, we typically recommend those complex carbohydrates that are high in fiber, a lower sodium diet to help prevent those long-term health consequences. In the event of an alarm, in the event of having to do high-intensity activity, though, you get that fuel faster. You're able to utilize it quickly. The downside is, that recovery piece. So how would you recover, right? Ideally, it would be some sort of like protein shake, protein bar. I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with what lunches you have on the line. Maybe me and Pearl will talk about it before next time. But, combining protein and carbs post-workout, trying to get some sort of, again, dried fruit, nuts or seeds or something like that to help boost some of that antioxidant profile. But I hope that's answering the question and that makes sense. Yes, no?
Yeah, I think so. And then we got another question. Again, do you support liquid IV or zip fizz? And again, I think this is kind of in the context of, intense working environments on the line, prolonged efforts, things like that.
Yep. So again, next week is like that performance. This is like foundations. So if it seems kind of lame, it's because it's foundations and foundations can be lame sometimes. So next week it's fire and performance-based stuff. But yes, liquid IV, drip drop. I'm not familiar with zip fizz. Another big one that we do over here, like the keto version that a lot of people will do is, now I'm forgetting that, Element, LMNT, capitalized. So I will add an explanation in the hydration portion of next week. But yes, I do recommend those. They are for when you are sweating your butt off, you're doing a significant amount of work in the heat. That's when you use them. If you're going to just lift at the gym in an air conditioned environment, I don't think it's necessary. But basically what those liquid IV drip drop, they are an oral rehydration solution. So they have double the sodium, about half of the sugar of sports drink. Now, the best part about the liquid IV and the drip drop is they are portable, right? So you can fit them in a pack. You can carry them with you. Compared to the same amount of Gatorade, lugging that around is not possible, even on a safety unit or something like that, or a safety officer unit or something like that. So now people often ask me then, well, why do I need sugar? Why do I need to have sugar in this? When we talk about rapid rehydration, the key factors is sodium, glucose, and fluid. What glucose does is it helps transport sodium across the cell membrane faster. Without glucose, it takes a little bit more time to pull sodium across the membrane. And then once sodium's across the membrane, it also pulls fluid down that gradient. So what sodium, having that little bit of glucose is a key factor in rapidly rehydrating your cells when you don't have a lot of time and you're significantly, or it's technically mild to moderate dehydration. So again, I will have slides with pictures that explain this way better, I think, in the next one, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yep, I think we're good.
Cool. All right, let's talk about caffeine because this is another trigger point. So caffeine, and I don't know about you guys. I don't know how bad energy drinks are in Cal Fire, but like in Fairfax, it's pretty bad. We do the Nova schedule, or I think they even call it the California schedule. So like they do 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, off, on 4 days off. And relative to the 24/48, that was what we had in Montgomery County with the Kelly, people are not recovering from their shift, especially in those busy areas closer to DC. I mean, they are just running ragged. And if they get held over, of course, you only have 12 hours to recover. So that, sorry.
Hey, May, yeah, just to let you know, so there were 3 on 4 off is the normal schedule for Cal Fire. They are extended out in the field as well. So, but 3 on 4 off is what we will go with.
Okay, that's pretty brutal too. So yeah, you guys are kind of right in that brutal schedule. So in any case, the tendency is if the citizens do not allow you to sleep, you kind of have to rely on caffeine. And here's the thing. If I was a dietitian and I came in and told first responders to eliminate caffeine entirely, I would be burned at the stake and not invited back. So the FDA recommendation for caffeine, reasonable doses, is under 400 milligrams per day. And that is roughly 30 to 40 ounces of coffee in a day, which usually people are like, okay, cool, that's reasonable. Now, where this starts to get out of control is when we add the pre-workout and we add the energy drinks. Now, as a dietitian, it's really hard for me to say that energy drinks or pre-workouts are something I recommend. I actually do not recommend pre-workouts or energy drinks, but I also know my husband will dry scoop pre-workout going 80 miles an hour to the gym, whether I tell him it's a good idea or not, right? And that's how a lot of my first responders are. And to be fair, it is kind of hard, right? So, you start off with coffee as a rookie, and then you start getting really tired and you add the pre-workout to make your workout a little easier. And then that starts to wear off. So you build these tolerances to caffeine, and then you need the energy drink to get through the rest of the shift. You have another crash, you have another energy drink. So it is really easy, especially with these bangs, Celsius heat, what's another one? NOS, and then that's C4. C4 is the other one. With these 300 milligram energy drinks to hit 900 milligrams a day, 1,000 milligrams of caffeine a day, I've seen really high numbers. So the problem with that is when we blow through this 400 milligram recommended ceiling is typically you're drinking it later in the day, and it's probably going to impact your sleep. Now, you may say, Megan, we have coffee after dinner every night, and I can have a cup of coffee and go right to bed, and I have no problem falling asleep. It's not falling asleep. It's your sleep cycles that we're concerned about. And we'll hit this a little bit harder in the last presentation. But with your sleep cycles, so you have awake, light, deep, and REM, or rapid eye movement. And when you have caffeine so technically we recommend stopping 4 to 5 hours before bed. So within those 4 to 5 hours, it can impact your sleep cycles. So you spend less time in deep sleep, you spend less time in rapid eye movement sleep, and then you wake up the next day feeling tired. And then what do you pick up more of? Caffeine. So typically the recommendation, excuse me, as best you can, is to stop 4 to 5 hours before bed. So if bedtime is 9, or like you can go to bed at 9 o'clock on shift, that would be stopping around 4 o'clock. The reason for that is caffeine has a half-life of 4 to 5 hours. So if you have 200 milligrams at 4 o'clock, you still have 100 milligrams circulating around 9 p.m. And that 100 milligrams is enough to just disturb your sleep cycles and the amount of time that you spend in those rapid eye movement and deep sleep phases. Now, you could tell me the lady in the ceiling also interrupts that, or, sleeping on cots and stuff like that. Yes, that we're not going to optimize sleep, on shift in a lot of these scenarios. I wish I had an answer for you to be able to make this better. But in general, that's just something you want to consider. These energy drinks, these pre-workout supplements, you really want to use them as needed and in lower doses. So if you choose to do them, even though I don't recommend them, you want to go for something under 200 milligrams in a sitting, and probably ideally start with 100, see how you feel. The other challenge with pre-workout supplements, back in the day. When I was in college, Jacked 3D, whatever you want to call it, that was really popular. They literally took it off the market, I'm pretty sure, because it took half of the frat boys out at my university with arrhythmias, because once one scoop didn't work, then they had to take 2 or 3. Right? So big thing is to make sure that you are keeping it to 1 serving and really only using it as needed. And then if the number starts to get high, then we don't recommend cold turkey. But one other thing that I want to recommend here, I say 400 milligrams a day. If you have acid reflux or high blood pressure, that number drops to 200 milligrams or less, or 20 ounces of coffee or less a day. Acid reflux is actually relatively popular in the fire service, and unfortunately the diet for acid reflux is like cut out everything you love, which is alcohol, caffeine, spicy foods, too much food, fatty foods, because those can lower the pressure on the esophageal sphincter and cause things to come back up. So we do recommend cutting back for those conditions. Now, if you have to cut back, what does that look like? Well, cold turkey is not recommended. And the reason cold turkey is not recommended, because cutting out coffee and caffeine is like brutal. I mean, flu-like symptoms are shown in the literature and shown by people, anecdotally. Drowsiness, nausea, headaches, those are a big concern. And that's for 2 to 9 days after cutting it out, and usually people do not last like the first day. So, we can gradually taper this back to reduce some of these symptoms. Another big symptom I really want first responders to pay attention to is mood disturbances. So there's a really good paper that I can send out if people would like to look at it, talking about cutting back on caffeine. But one of the consequences of cutting back on caffeine is it's actually a mood enhancer. So when we cut out caffeine, it can cause people's moods to drop. And that can be concerning, especially if we're talking about first responders who are maybe trying to work through some mental health stuff. And by work through, I've talked to first responders who drink a lot of caffeine, like a ton of caffeine, and pick up a ton of overtime and like really just kind of work themselves to death because they're trying not to think about stuff. Or when they sit down and stop doing things or cut back on caffeine or don't do as much caffeine, they, some of the trauma kind of starts to come up, or they just feel really uncomfortable sitting still. So if that's you and you start cutting back on caffeine, I just want people to be aware that that actually is a side effect of cutting back on caffeine, is that low mood, and that can be concerning. So that's why I really push working with a therapist when you're cutting back on your caffeine, especially if it's like in the 1200, it's like really, really high, because I'm curious what else is going on if you're drinking that much caffeine. You can also gradually taper back. So you can swap to lower calf, half calf, or no calf, which I know is sacrilege. Like if a rookie brews decaf coffee, I'm pretty sure they will throw the whole rookie out. So I understand. But switching over to half calf, maybe after 2 o'clock, that can make a difference. Or decaf after, so for a lot of people, it's just drinking a hot liquid. That's kind of calming, especially during the workday. So that could be something to think about. You can also consider though, cutting back on shift versus off. So for some people, if they need to pull back, they're going to pull back on their day off shift. But if you've got 4 kids and a side job, that might not be your best decision. You might need to cut back on shift. So really consider those 2 things. I have worked with a lot of my firefighters actually on cutting back on caffeine. And the funny thing is as they get down to 600 or 400 milligrams, they're like, I actually have more energy. And the reason they have more energy is their sleep improves. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you really think I'm a little crazy for this, that's okay. But cutting back can make a difference. Any questions on that?
There is a couple of questions.
Yep.
One is, can you speak a little bit about the caffeine from green tea? And I guess for that matter, any caffeinated teas and sort of the amounts of caffeine there and how that might be an impact?
Yeah, so caffeine is caffeine is caffeine is caffeine, right? So like if it comes from guarana, green tea, it's still caffeine, right? Now there are sometimes other substances that can impact how that caffeine feels. So for example, like energy drinks, they typically have guarana and or mate and a bunch of other herbals that can lead to like that shakiness that people get from energy drinks. But yeah, so green tea typically, I think it's typically lower than coffee, but it's typically higher than some of like the herbal teas like chamomile and those kinds of things. But again, I'm sorry, it's been a minute. I might have it on the slide back here. No. So yeah, typically I think green tea might actually be a little bit higher than the brewed tea. But if you want to tell me I'm wrong, I also understand.
I'll try to look it up and drop it in the chat, because gotta be honest, I'm a big coffee drinker, not a tea drinker. So I don't know the specifics of the green tea. I know it's much less than coffee, but as far as the milligrams, I don't know, but I can do a little search for that and drop it in there. And there's another question about yerba mate, and that is a green tea as well. So that would be comparable.
The concern is when you see these energy drinks put like the yerba mate plus like the caffeine from like other teas and then coffee bean extract, and they combine them all together, and then that can get the number up really high. And that's where we really see a lot of the concerns.
I think that's it. Yeah, cool. We just got someone saying, what about ghost energy drinks? I'm not familiar with that. So I'm assuming that's just another type of energy drink.
So actually, I'm not really as familiar with like the marketing for Ghost as much. I believe it's at least 200, if not 300 milligrams. So it's still a concern. And actually, like I have a lot of people report to me that Ghost makes them really jittery. Like out of all the energy drinks they could possibly do it. So that's the one. And now that I'm back on the screen. So when we talk about cutting back, I'm actually at a very sad point in my career where I'm recommending Monster and Red Bull, which I didn't know I would get to this point. But when we talk about like Ghost and Celsius Heat and what was the other one? C4, they're 300 milligram energy drinks, right? So if someone feels like the need to have an energy drink during the shift, they don't do coffee, they hate tea, they don't do a lot of other caffeinated beverages, then pulling them down to a Monster, like the white Monsters or a Red Bull, actually pulls their caffeine down from 300 to 150, 160 milligrams. So that is a stepping stone to get people's caffeine lower. If you did they elaborate on what they meant by Ghost at all?
Sorry, here I am talking and I'm muted. It just says, what about Ghost energy drinks? So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So what do we know? So I don't know if it's like Celsius. So Celsius like markets itself as like the world's healthiest energy drink, and it just got sued or just settled, I think, in court for basically they claimed that they didn't have any preservatives. So that's why they were healthy. And it turns out they have citric acid, which while that is like a natural preservative, it's still a preservative, so they lost that argument. They also claim to boost metabolism, but if you look at the studies on their website, basically they compared groups that exercised and drank Celsius versus a group that didn't exercise and didn't drink Celsius, and the people who exercised had a higher metabolism. Is it because of the Celsius or is it because of the exercise? So I can't wait till they get sued for that. But in any case, like there's really not a healthy energy drink. Like we can lower the sugar and it makes it better. We can find it from natural sources, but just because it's natural doesn't mean it's healthy, because technically arsenic is natural, but if we put arsenic in stuff, that causes issues. It all comes down to dose dependence and stuff like that. So just a lot of this stuff, especially the energy drinks, the supplements, which I'll talk about in a minute, it's really a marketing game. And as much as I would love to say that supplements fix things, they really don't do a whole lot. So be careful with that. Okay. So, and I want to see, oh yeah, I did want to go through this. Okay. All right. So shifting a little bit, actually, we're going to go through the supplements first, because I think this is where I'm going to get a lot of questions, and I can always shift stuff to a later presentation if needed from the lifestyle standpoint. But with the supplement piece, okay, so like I said, my background's in bodybuilding. When I was in college, my undergraduate thesis was actually on male college student supplement use, which was fascinating. But the challenge is like the marketing for the supplement industry is so incredible. And that makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's really the truth. And the problem is really no supplement can replace hard work and good nutrition. Like you got to go to the gym, you got to put the work in, and you got to have a solid base for nutrition. Now, of course, I know from the solid base nutrition standpoint, like when you're on deployments, like sometimes that base is not going to be great. And sometimes you just have to do the best with what you have. But when you're back day-to-day life, These are the two biggest things. This is where you're going to see the best results. I haven't put sleep on there yet, but I would argue that sleep and focusing on sleep is another big factor here. But the problem with supplements is there's limited FDA approval. They do get approved by the FDA, but typically it's aftermarket, and they can still get in trouble, for having things in it that they shouldn't have. Herbalife always gets in trouble with the arsenic, so that's a big one. But the big thing with supplements is typically you want to spend the money for a third-party tested product. And that's typically Informed Choice, NSF International, or USP. NSF International and Informed Choice are typically your sports-related supplements, so the stuff you would get with the GNC guy. And then USP is more of like your vitamins and minerals. But what these seals do is they give you that extra layer of protection. So basically the supplement company is saying, we sent our product to a third-party lab. They confirmed that all the ingredients that are in this product, or we're claiming are in this product, are there, right? And in the right quantities. If it doesn't have the third-party choice, it's not a guarantee that it actually has what it has in it. So typically it's cheaper to get supplements without third-party testing, but it's also riskier. So just keep all that in mind. If you're wondering if your supplement is third-party tested, you can actually go to the website and type in the brand, and it'll come up with the list of the brand. Or these little labels will be somewhere on there in really, really small print. But typically in terms of supplement companies, like I know Optimum Nutrition, most of their products are on there. But keep in mind, like just because one brand has has one product tested, it doesn't mean they sent all of their products. So do keep that in mind. And I don't love saying supplement brands that I recommend, because then people just assume that it's perfect for them and whatever supplement is effective. Just because it's third-party tested, that assures for safety. That does not assure for that it works. So these are typically things with a supplements facts label. So sports bars, gels, protein powders, they actually have typically a nutrition facts label. So at the very top, the labels look the same, but at the very top, it'll say supplement or it'll say nutrition. A nutrition facts label, typically it's going to go through full FDA approvals and check boxes and have a lot more standards, where supplements a little less standards. So now, when it comes to choosing supplements, and I'll go through a couple of them, a couple different types. When it comes to choosing supplements, you really want to do your research and really probably work with a trained professional. A trained professional is typically going to be a dietitian or a physician. Now, there are some trainers that may be really well-versed in supplements, but not all of them are. And not all of them are considering all of the other factors from a health standpoint in the individual, which can get a little issue, can become an issue. Now, if you want to research your own supplements and you want to find evidence-based stuff to tell you if it's actually accurate or not, examine.com is the number one recommendation I have for supplements. Examine.com is basically a bunch of researchers who are not funded by any particular brand. They basically read the research and tell you the strength of the research for those particular supplements. Actually, for the NSCA, NASM, and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, if you have any of those certifications, if you sign up for the membership, they will actually give you continuing ed for reading on that website. So I actually really do like that site. Basically, if you go on there and you're like, hey, what does turmeric do? And should I take it? It'll give you the dose. It'll give you what it does. It'll tell you if it's effective for what you want it to do. So if you're trying to see if turmeric cures depression, it probably doesn't, but it may be helpful for joint health. And if you're trying to, improve joint health, then maybe that could be a consideration. The other option would be OPS, which is Operation Supplement Safety. It's the DoD website, because basically they had a lot of the younger military members. They have a big issue with taking a crazy amount of supplements, and they see a lot of side effects because of all these crazy concoctions that they're on. So they actually have a safety checker. They have articles on nutrition and stuff like that. So I do recommend those too. Examine.com, knowing that my firefighters love pictures, they have lots of infographics on Instagram and I believe Facebook. So those are two places you can check them out there. But let's kind of talk about some general supplements. So one of the big ones, well, yeah, there are some other big ones that we have to talk about, but branched chain amino acids, BCAAs. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people used to think, especially in the bodybuilding powerlifting communities, that BCAAs would like lead to gains, right? Lead to muscle gain, significant muscle gain. And recent research is suggesting that that's probably not the case, particularly if people eat enough protein. And like I said, so that enough protein is about roughly 0.4 to 0.7 grams per pound. So most of my firefighters, I'm going to tell you, like in general, they're getting that amount of protein. So it's less than what I recommended for muscle gain, but it's more than the recommended RDA. But branched chain amino acids. So first of all, what are they? BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, are the breakdown of protein. So protein comes in this kind of like mangled up ball, if you want to think of it that way. When it comes into your digestive system, your digestive system breaks it into a peptide, so kind of like a long strand, and that final breakdown piece is amino acids. And there are 3 branched chain amino acids: valine, leucine, and isoleucine. Leucine is particularly important for muscle synthesis. Isoleucine is important for glucose uptake, which is in that case is important for muscle recovery. And valine, we're still not sure what valine does, but it's a branched chain amino acid, so they think it does something. So what they used to think was that these branched chain amino acids, when you consume them, they would bypass the liver and go straight to the muscle for recovery. In the case of cancer cachexia or cardiac cachexia, so when someone is like really going through it with cancer and cardiovascular issues and their body is significantly depleted, that works. It actually does. They see improved outcomes for people with those conditions. But people who are in healthy states, who eat enough protein, they're just not seeing enough evidence to support that. Now, it could be useful, or they can be useful to prevent fatigue in novice athletes. To me, that could be a consideration for maybe recruits, especially during fire suppression rotations, because they're just, especially hose week, ladder week, any burns. I mean, they're sore as anything. So, maybe you could consider BCAAs. They're relatively cheap. Sometimes they make people drink more water. These are the things that if you saw the bodybuilder bros at the gym, it's like their blue jug of water. That's kind of what's usually mixed in. So if that's something you want to try and see if it helps reduce muscular soreness, typically, again, it's in people who don't work out a ton. So if you've been working out for 10 years, you can consider 20 grams of BCAAs. They're just protein. So like, as long as it's BCAAs alone, it's not mixed in with other stuff, probably a safe option. So fine. Do I recommend them across the board? Probably not. Another one, creatine monohydrate. So creatine monohydrate is usually like the number one supplement I get the most questions about. And there's a lot of myths about creatine. So they used to think that creatine would like cause dehydration. That myth has since been debunked. They used to think creatine would cause rhabdo, also been debunked. But creatine monohydrate, so what creatine does is in your first 6 seconds of exercise, it can provide additional an additional energy source. So the first kind of energy system is that creatine phosphate system. And you have creatine floating around to produce ATP. So that usually your muscles are roughly, for someone who is not vegetarian, it's about 80% saturated with creatine. When you start taking it through a supplement, we could get that first energy system saturated so there's a little bit more fuel available to help push through those first 6 seconds. So what that would mean is an extra rep or two. A little bit longer sprint, a little bit longer push, which can result in more power and more strength. So the big things that creatine monohydrate, this specific one, can help improve strength and power, and it can help potentially actually reduce. There is some studies suggesting that it could reduce mental fatigue with sleep deprivation. Hello, firefighters, like that. I mean, even if you're not trying to see crazy gains in the gym, I mean, reducing mental fatigue. There are some more studies also suggesting that it could potentially delay Alzheimer's and dementia. I believe more research is needed there. So creatine is a very well-researched supplement. Not a whole lot of side effects. The biggest side effects that they see is typically diarrhea or nausea if they take too much at once. So anybody who's familiar with creatine, they may have heard of a loading dose where you take 25 grams a day for 7 days. Basically, it typically takes a month to saturate the muscles with creatine if you take 5 grams a day for a month. You know, for first responders who really like a quick fix, that's a month. It's a long time to be consistent with something. So people will do those loading doses. The challenge with the loading dose is creatine. If anybody's ever taken the powder, it feels like sand on your stomach, right? So if you're really loading up on that, those loading phases can cause stomach cramping. So it's uncomfortable. So typically the recommendation is if you would like to try creatine to improve strength and power or potentially help reduce mental fatigue slightly, you can consider 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day. Typically men, it's on that 5-gram range. For smaller women, it's going to be that 3-gram range. And you take that daily regardless of your training schedule. So a lot of people are like, should I take it before exercise? Should I take it after? You take it when you remember to take it. So for me, I know like it's better just to blend it into a smoothie or like mix it into some juice or something. Because if you mix it into water, typically it's going to taste terrible. So you do want to take that daily. The challenge with this is a lot of people, I take creatine. It's in my pre-workout supplement. Well, do you take pre-workout every single day? Probably not. So you're probably not maximizing the benefit of that creatine. You're probably not maximizing the saturation of your muscle stores. So it is something you probably want to buy as a standalone supplement. But again, it's not essential. It may help with that strength and power if that's something you're really focusing on. It may help with mental health or fatigue and that kind of thing. The type that you want to go for is creatine monohydrate. There are other types, but creatine monohydrate is typically the cheapest and most effective. So one other thing I do want to mention, so Bang Energy used to market, I don't think they market it anymore because they got a slap on the wrist for it, but super creatine. Anybody ever see that super creatine on the Bang labels? So creatine is not stable in a liquid environment. So any drink that is already like a liquid, a pre-mixed drink, creatine is not stable in that liquid environment. So you have to take it through a powder, a capsule, and now they have gummy form. So they figured out how to put it into a gummy, but they're expensive as heck right now because it's literally recently they did that. So that super creatine in your Bang drink is really not doing anything. Also, they found out after they did some research into the brand because they were getting in trouble for all kinds of things, they didn't even put creatine in the Bang. So anyway, trigger point. But so creatine could be a consideration. It's relatively safe, not a whole lot of side effects. But again, you can still get it through eggs and meats and those kinds of things. Questions on that?
We have some questions. The first one is your opinion on ZMA before bed, or maybe just speak to ZMAs in general. I know that's a popular supplement.
Sure. Zinc, magnesium, aspartate. So let me put some information on that in the recovery phase because I definitely should put that in the recovery one. So zinc, magnesium, aspartate may help with sleep. I think it's a hit or miss thing, but I can go into detail in the future in the recovery section.
Perfect. And then any different thoughts on EAA supplements?
Essential amino acids. You're getting it through food. So, you're getting it through protein sources, right? So, essential amino acids, maybe in the case of a vegetarian where you're not sure if you're getting all of those essential amino acids because typically, wheat products have different essential amino acids than like beans or something like that. So, maybe, but I wouldn't say I would say they're not worth the money. They're not dangerous, but not worth the money.
And the last question we've got down here is, do you get creatine out of fish naturally?
That is a great question. I have always seen mostly red meat products That's typically, I would assume you would probably get some creatine, but it's probably not as high as red meat, dairy, and eggs. A lot of good questions today. I really wish like Google would just download into my brain.
Do EAA/BCAA help with hydration?
Secondarily. So they're not going to help hydrate you. Like they're not like the glucose helps the sodium get into the cell, and therefore it helps promote water into the cell. It just may help. A lot of times these BCAAs actually taste decent. So because they taste good, people are drinking more water. So it's kind of a secondary thing more than like an actual primary result.
So just a quick, I did a quick Google search for the creatine in fish. It says meat and fish are good sources of creatine, but your body can also produce its own creatine. 100 grams serving of salmon gives your body 0.9 grams of creatine, and 100 grams of tuna provides 0.4 grams of creatine.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, fish. I think usually 3 grams a day is what you're looking to get through food. Like that's the average. But keep in mind you're trying to saturate the muscle store. So it may be better to add it as a supplement, but again, it's not essential. So some of my guys who eat, like my husband, when he eats a plate, it's like, piled with a lot of protein, several chicken thighs or whatever. If you're eating that much, yeah, probably not. Typically my vegetarians, my females, my people who struggle get to protein intake, then you may want to consider the creatine.
And I think you mentioned your protein powder you preferred earlier, but someone's asking again, any quality protein supplement suggestions?
Yeah. So when I make a brand recommendation, let me clarify that I'm like not sponsored by any brands or anything like that. I make it based off of cost and taste, right? Obviously, and does it work, right? So the Costco right now, because it's the January, this current sales cycle, the Optimum Nutrition protein powder in the big black bag, or you'll see it in a big black tub on Amazon, is, I want to say, $45 for 6 pounds. So you're not going to see a cheaper one, in my experience. There are other ones, but a lot of times what these protein powders will do is they'll be like, it'll look cheaper, but then you look at the back of the label and it requires 2 scoops per serving to get to the 30 grams of protein. Optimum Nutrition is like about a 4th cup scoop compared to like Muscle Farm. It's like a half scoop or a half cup scoop. So you have to take double. You go through it a lot faster. So Optimum Nutrition is the one that I like from a cost effective standpoint. There are a million different brands out there. There's My Protein that'll like make a zillion different flavors for you. But most people, we don't want to spend all that extra money. So they have chocolate and vanilla at Costco, but they have like 100 different flavors on Amazon.
Something I'll add to that, actually, I've gone down the rabbit hole on this for plant-based sources of protein powders. And I think a really good way to determine a good company is which one will respond to you when you ask them for their COAs. So if you want to sort of narrow it down and really get in the weeds, I mean, this would be for like heavy metal testings and things like that, reaching out to the companies that you like and are curious about and seeing if they respond to your requests to see what's in their products. So if you really kind of want to go in a deep dive there, that may be a way for you guys to determine quality supplement. It's just kind of doing some legwork and reaching out to the companies you consider and seeing what kind of information they'll share with you about their products.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, like, from a plant-based Orgain versus like Vega, my dietitian friends tend to like Vega better from like a taste standpoint. But granted, like from the heavy metal testing side, I couldn't tell you. I mean, you could probably.
They didn't test so well.
Yeah, I'd kind of assume because they're a big enough brand that I would.
Yeah. I was a Vega. I loved their products. They were one of the first ones on the market, that was mainstream. I've since switched to Planet Protein, which is really, really, really clean. They post their lab analyses. It's more of a small company. But yeah, I that was eye-opening for me, is when you realize, and this goes along the lines, I would think, with the supplements, anything like this, is doing a little bit of research and making sure the products you're consuming are clean and safe, especially if they have things like chocolate and stuff like that added to them, because there can be a lot of higher than safe levels of like cadmium and like metals and all kinds of weird stuff that you just wouldn't expect. You're assuming these companies are clean and safe, but that's not necessarily always the case. And like you said, when it comes to supplements, they're not regulated in the same way that the FDA regulates food. And so buyer beware on that.
Yes, they are regulated though. I had a very nasty, lengthy conversation on LinkedIn, apparently, because I said there was no FDA recommendation. Turns out I was wrong about that, even though that's what they teach us in school. So again, it's like that. You can put it on the market. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on, like in terms of testing before supplements put on the market, but they don't really look into it and dig into it until after customers have complaints, which isn't like the best way to do things. So yeah. Okay. So I have another hot topic, testosterone boosters. And if this is something you guys have questions about, I'm happy to put more slides maybe in the recovery section, but the once over, and my husband, I hope my dogs are not like really, really bad. And my husband is going to get in trouble after this. So you can put some prayers in for him. But testosterone boosters. Okay. And I'm sure you've seen the Nugenics, ads on the TV, but testosterone boosters, they're not recommended. First of all, if your testosterone is within normal ranges, I believe that's around 300 to 1,000. Even if it's 350, that's technically, considered not required for testosterone replacement. So first of all, before you even start trying to boost testosterone, like you don't want to self-diagnose and not even need to boost your testosterone, right? So getting that checked is important. Now, if you see your testosterone go from like 800, you're like always high, and then, 6 months later, it's down to 300. Now that's a conversation to have with your doctor. But the thing with testosterone is the big things you need to focus on is sleep. It's hard. Fat loss. So if you have a lot of extra body fat, and lifting heavy. Those are the three biggest things in improving testosterone. However, with the fat loss thing, we also see a tank in testosterone. Actually, if you look at bodybuilders, testosterone's right around showtime. It's bad. Like it's really, they could be considered like, I don't know if deficient is the right word, but like basically deficient. And that's because when you go on these extreme cuts, your testosterone does not do well. So those extreme diets is also a risk factor for seeing tanking in testosterone. So now testosterone, typically the symptoms of like low testosterone is low libido, and weight gain, unexplained weight gain. That's a big thing. Another thing for improving testosterone is cutting back on alcohol. So examine.com, like I said, they do a really good job at explaining things in a way that actually makes sense for the general person. And they have a whole article on testosterone boosters. So that's where I would recommend if you want to read into that a little bit more. But if this is a topic you want more information, I'm happy to delve into that a little bit more in the recovery section. But a lot of the times, if we measure the testosterone of a recruit or a rookie who really hasn't had that sleep deprivation, and that overall just accumulation of fatigue over like 15 years, and we compare to those 15-year members, it's not going to compare. We're going to see tanking in testosterone. And a lot of times the reason for that is because of the sleep. So it's hard for me to give you a tangible explanation. A lot of people see improvements after retirement, but for my people who still have 5 to 10 years, like it is trying to get those naps in. It is trying to focus on sleep when you can. It is trying to pull back on overtime if you can afford it financially. And those are hard conversations and hard considerations to have. But at the end of the day, your health is your biggest thing. So do I have any like surface level questions on that, or should I kind of, where are we with that?
We have a few more questions about like powders and supplements. Yep. Can you explain full spectrum protein powders?
I actually am not aware of what exactly.
I'm not familiar with that either.
I'm not. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, how about protein powders with collagen? A good or a gimmick?
I think I lean more towards gimmick. Some people see improvements. If you see improvements in your skin, then that's great. But if you are taking this collagen supplement and it's been several months and you haven't seen any noticeable benefit, my understanding is collagen is a bunch of specific ECA or essential amino acids kind of built up together. But when you consume collagen, what's going to happen is you're going to digest collagen and break it back into those little amino acids. Does it come back as collagen? Does it build itself back into collagen is the real question. So that's why I'm kind of a little sketched out. Not sketched out is maybe not the right word. It's not going to be hurtful, but it may not be as effective as you think.
Sort of like going back to the giving your body what it needs in real food source. I mean, it is smart enough to build and break down what it needs to.
Right, exactly.
Okay, how about thoughts on athletic greens?
So it's not that I think it's going to be harmful, but is it worth the money? I don't think so. Could it maybe have some things in there, like when it has the spirulina or the plant-based phenols that could be helpful for cholesterol lowering? Maybe. But again, real food is the big thing. So you may be supplementing fiber and getting some antioxidants, but also keep in mind when we eat real food, there are certain things in plants that we still don't even know are important. And there could be cofactors, so things that help with digestion or help with utilization of certain antioxidants. And when you put a bunch of things like in a test tube, it doesn't mean it's going to create comparable results in the body. In fact, antioxidant supplements are discouraged across the board, any sort of antioxidant supplement, because they're finding that they might not be as effective and they may even be potentially slightly harmful. So not like you're going to die harmful, but like not as effective as real food.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you put it that way. That, again, I think goes into that sort of reductionist sort of separating food out into these like separate components, when really it's a much more holistic thing. Like you mentioned, we don't even fully understand, the full benefits of like these foods and all of the interactions all of these different compounds have in our body. So by isolating these things, it's just so different than eating food, real food that our body understands and has this knowledge of how to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind too, so like a lot of this is marketing. And supplement companies get into trouble all the time for marketing. There's like a really good YouTube channel called The Illuminati, which again sounds like a conspiracy theory, but she actually pulls out like all of the lawsuits against like a lot of these big companies, including Beachbody. Remember when Beachbody had that, oh God, what was it? They had that like superfood shake that was part of the multi-level marketing. But like basically the marketing is saying that it's going to, improve your skin, improve your health, improve your energy levels. But really, like, you can't condense that down into a shake. It comes down to so much more than just pounding this shake with superfood ingredients. And superfood is actually a marketing term. So, really it comes down to these balancing things. And unfortunately, it's really hard for me to eat your fruits and vegetables, try and take a nap, drink your water, do your exercise, and try and make that sexy. If I figure it out.
And that also doesn't make these companies billions of dollars. So,
no,
I'm glad you're bringing up the point about marketing because, yes, we can go down the rabbit hole with a lot of this nutrition stuff, but it doesn't have to be so complicated either. I know these companies out there really would like to sell us products and make us believe we need these things, but we have this like amazing knowledge in our bodies, and we've been eating, food for our whole existence as a species, and the power is in that. It doesn't have to be so complicated, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So there is one more supplement I wanted to talk about because I think we're coming up on time.
Yeah, we got like probably like 5 more minutes, and then I'll close it
I'll
out.
keep it at 5.
Okay with that? Cool. All right.
Yeah, it's okay. So I always think that it's like, I'm not going to fill 6 hours of nutrition, and then here I am, probably going to go to the line. So I will add some, maybe if you guys have boop, 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 trying to get to the end. If you guys have topics that you really want to hear about, please maybe either put them in the chat now, maybe shoot an email to Ryan or Pearl. Oh, I meant to go over fat supplements. Oh, I can talk about it here. But shoot that email over so I can make sure that I actually hit that topic for you. But the last one I was going to talk about was fat burners. And I can try and get back to that slide. Man, I had a lot more that I thought I was going to get through. But so
a lot of questions, a lot of good questions.
A lot of questions. Sorry. Yeah. I'd rather make sure I hit your questions and, maybe bring it up later or that kind of stuff. So fat burners, fat burning supplements. This is a hard no, hard pass. There's not one I recommend. There's not a brand that I think does a good job. They are basically a big old side effect waiting to happen. And a lot of them actually result in death and liver toxicity. So Herbalife. But in any case, so they are ineffective and there's a really high risk for side effects. Typically fat burners are very high in caffeine. And in fact, one of those Gen Z rappers whose name is Numbers, just actually went to the hospital because he took 2 of those hydroxycut pills with a McDonald's coffee and it ended up causing cardiac symptoms for him. And the reason for that is each of those pills was 200 milligrams of caffeine each plus the coffee. So it was a significant amount in a very short period of time, in addition to some of those some of these additives that cause those issues for that person. And of course, that's a singular person. But the other question I have for you is if there is a supplement. So one of them is ECCG, which green tea, I think it's a green tea. It's extracted from green tea. And it has been suggested that it can burn an additional 30 calories per day. Is it worth $30 for a month's supply to get an extra 30 calories per day? Personally, I don't think so, in addition to the risk for side effects, because a lot of times, again, as first responders, you're picking up other caffeine supplements elsewhere. So really, it does come down to diet quality and portion size. However, you're going to see 2 things on this screen, phentermine and Ozempic. These are not things you can get over the counter, and nor would I ever recommend getting them over the counter. These are things, phentermine and Ozempic are 2 medications that I have used in the past in weight loss clinics. I used to work for a company called Core Life, and we actually do, we can prescribe phentermine through our OC Health Clinic, and we have done that in the past. So what phentermine is, it is a stimulant similar to Adderall, Vyvanse, many ADHD medications. You can't take it typically if you have uncontrolled high blood pressure or cardiac issues, again, because it's a stimulant. But basically what it does, again, if anybody's ever been on Adderall or Vyvanse, a lot of you guys know that that really kills your appetite, right? So it is a very effective appetite suppressant. However, what happens is a lot of our patients think, okay, well, phentermine, it's boosting my metabolism somehow. It's not doing that. It's effectively reducing your appetite, helping you eat less without, when you cut your calories, it's hard. A couple weeks in, it starts to get challenging. So if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, I would say between 30 or more pounds, and you've really struggled with it in the past, and you've tried a bunch of different things, considering something like phentermine with under a physician's, you have to be working with a physician because they have to prescribe it for you for a short period of time, could be effective. It is something you could consider. Ozempic is another one in California. All the celebrities are taking, which they shouldn't be. It's semaglutide. It is a type 2 diabetes treatment to help with insulin management. Again, you have to have type 2 diabetes. If you have type 2 diabetes, or you don't have to, you can take it without it. It's another appetite suppressant in addition to insulin management. And it is very effective for weight loss. So if you have someone or you personally have type 2 diabetes, it may be something that you could consider. Insurance will not cover it if you do not have a history of cardiac issues, significant weight gain for a long period of time, or you have type 2 diabetes. And without insurance, the Ozempic is about $1,400 a month. So of course the celebrities can afford it, but not that it's healthy to do it that way. Now, while I do not think the starting point, if you've never had to try and cut, lose body fat in your life, the starting point is not medication. Medication it's been years of you struggling and you really have a challenge with appetite. The sleep deprivation is getting to you. Maybe consider working with your doctor in addition to a dietitian to help strategize with you. that is what I'm suggesting those for. I just bring that up as an option. Now, do I have questions on that? Because I know that's kind of a weird, I don't want to say it's a recommendation. It's just a consideration.
Hey, Megan, what Pearl put in the chat, I think any additional questions, she's going to compile them and then she'll send them over to you, and then we can maybe address them next Friday at the beginning of the training, if that works.
Gosh, that works.
Okay.
Yes, that works. And I can maybe, if I see a trend in them, I'll do some more research, make sure I can answer those questions effectively. I did not get to any of the lifestyle stuff I wanted to get to.
Oh, I know, so much.
Sorry, I get distracted and I just start going on tangents. So I will be here next week. And if you have questions in the meantime, you can email me, Megan Lautz at Gmail, or shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. Actually, I'm on TikTok now, unfortunately. But that's where I do a lot of these like posts, these really bite-sized information tips and stuff like that. So
yeah, and just thank you, Megan. It was very informative. I really appreciate you coming on today. And this is something that we're going to continue to do more virtual trainings. So this is kind of our first shot of putting something out there for the whole department, but we are going to start doing a lot more of these through Vector Solutions. So hopefully we'll have more of a reach than what we normally have